Breath of the Wild was an ARPG that showed how art design can kind of mask some of the hardware limitations of the Nintendo Switch, and showed us how feature-rich and content-packed a game can be on an SD card, with a pretty damn long average clear time. And I just couldn't keep this information to myself. If you like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is its predecessor turned to 11. The map is massive, and then you realize, ooh, there's actually 3 levels or tiers to this map. There's a floating sky city with pillars or islands above me. Then there's also a Stranger Things style upside down world, an alternate dimension, where a lot of the landmarks of the regular world are mirrored, but masked in darkness and surrounded by this ruby red gloom that'll F you up if you step on it. But if you didn't like certain aspects of Breath of the Wild, like the weapon durability system, swack swack snap, you didn't like the traversal or climbing system, felt like you were always running out of stamina.
Surprise, motherfucker!
None of that has changed. In fact, the combat system is virtually untouched, other than adding a few new enemies and a couple of game mechanics such as Fuse, which can really change up gameplay. Tears of the Kingdom has been my go-to game since it launched. I'm having a hard time setting it down even to make this review, and that's a good thing because Breath of the Wild, as amazing as it was, just didn't grab me from the get-go. Without further ado, whistle to your horse, make sure Zelda knows who her Link is, and enjoy the review. Let's get it. The gameplay loop at its core is the same, however there are so many new mechanics introduced and each one is so in-depth and you could spend so much time perfecting it or just messing around trying to figure out the unique things that you can do in the world that maybe you weren't meant to do, or maybe the developers knew you were going to do it and you're not really breaking the game. But that's the beauty of Breath of the Wild, and sure enough its sequel is being able to take on challenges pretty much any way that you see fit. Whether it's how do you want to traverse a large area, how do you want to approach a fight, are we using stealth, are you going to attach a rocket to one of your arrows so there's no drop off and snipe them? Are you going to run in there like a madman hopped up on a bunch of foods that give you combat buffs and get to hacking and slashing? Are you going to play defensive and block, wait for that perfect parry and then get that precise strike? It's up to you. But just to touch on a couple of the things that you can do in this game: hunting, fishing, crafting, cooking. The new Fuse system allows you to bind virtually anything to your weapon or armor, so you could strap a jetpack onto your shield and as soon as you pull open your shield you jetpack into the air. Yeah, we're talking about hundreds, maybe even thousands of combinations of what you can strap onto weapons and armor with just the Fuse mechanic. But I will say this right up front: if you didn't like the traversal or the combat or the exploration or any of the vibes or experiences or the gameplay loop that you got in Breath of the Wild, then you were certainly not going to like Tears of the Kingdom, because it is identical to Breath of the Wild except turned up to 11. Everything is amplified, the world is bigger, the map is huge because there's actually 3 levels or tiers to it. We're going to talk about that. Combat is virtually unchanged. Other than the mechanic, you can now fuse pretty much anything to your weapons and armor. The hack and slash mechanics are still there. The combat buttons are still the same. So if you thought the combat system was underwhelming or boring in Breath of the Wild, it really hasn't changed here. And yes, the weapon durability system is still in place, so you're going to get a couple of whacks out of that wooden stick and then it's going to snap on you. I don't hate the durability system. However, I do think all the weapons across the board should have more durability, because it seems like you get like 3 whacks out of a base level weapon and then it just explodes in your hand. Early game at least. Later on, you're going to get some swords that are a little more durable for you, but you know what I'm talking about when you're picking up branches and stuff. It's just snapping on you. But this is everything all-encompassing: crafting, exploration, pretty much what you're going to be doing when you're playing the darn game. Tears of the Kingdom, even though it is truly Breath of the Wild at its core, but with a bunch more game mechanics and a bigger map and an updated version, if you will. I was grabbed earlier on in the game. I'm more intrigued with it. I'm enjoying the exploration. Maybe I just like the map more. Maybe it's just a different time in my life. I don't know, but I'm having a hell of a time with this game, as where Breath of the Wild just didn't capture me like that. It's still a fantastic title, and I have spent a shitload of time in it, but this is, I feel like I've already spent more time in Tears of the Kingdom, and the darn thing just came out. There's just a lot to do in this game. A lot of people are calling it basically the Nintendo version of Elden Ring, because you have a massive world, and everywhere you explore, you're stumbling upon a new randomized event or a new pack of enemies or something to do or explore, a new cavern to get knuckles deep in, a new shrine to get the energy from. Average clear time of the story and a couple of side quests is between 40 and 80 hours. I know that's a huge gap, but it really does depend on your playstyle. Are you exploring every shrine you see off in the distance to max out your hearts, or are you just trying to beeline through the main story? And if you're trying to get to 100% completion, you're looking at least 100 hours. I personally think the climbing or traversal system is good, even though it's pretty simplistic and I find myself running out of stamina every once in a while. It's a good system. It works. I climb up mountains. I have a good time. The combat system, despite the fact it is virtually unchanged from Breath of the Wild, despite the Fuse system and being able to use some of the new abilities in combat, other than that, the way you swing your weapon, the way you block, the way enemies come at you, it's all the same. I never had a problem with it in Breath of the Wild, but but I will say the sequel is much more challenging. I'm getting 2 or even 1 tapped from some pretty standard bare bones missionary position enemies that I find out in the map. It is a challenging game, but it's not a big deal if you die because the game autosaves a shitload in the background. Virtually every 3 minutes it's popping off an autosave, so if you die, facts are you're not going to have to backtrack much. You can also manually make a save game file at any time. I have to give it a 10 out of 10 just because there are so many different mechanics. There's crafting, there's fishing, there's hunting, there's this, there's that. There's so much to do. There's Sky City, then there's an upside down alternate dimension. There's just a lot to do. A quick spoiler-free rundown of the plot or story. Breath of the Wild is going to be a prelude. There's an undisclosed amount of time, which is very evident on the map as there's a lot of erosion. A lot of landmarks have been, well, changed. Very early in the game, you'll be introduced to Link's new abilities, which are incorporated in his altered right arm. There's 2 major items of interest, the Master Sword and a mysterious golden orb. And to summarize roughly a 40-hour story in a simple sentence, Link and Zelda go on a massive adventure through Hyrule to defeat Ganondorf, who seeks to destroy Hyrule because he's a douche. The NVIDIA Tegra X1 SoC and 4 gigs of RAM wasn't crack your back performance back in 2017, and it's certainly looking a little long in the tooth in 2023. However, Breath of the Wild and certainly Tears of the Kingdom are perfectly examples of how art design can not only counteract the hardware limitations of the Switch, but actually produce gorgeous games. Now, it's truly flabbergasting to look at something like Pokemon Arceus, considering these developers are working with the same hardware limitations, but these 2 worlds look completely different. One is fleshed out, rich, vibrant, and overall gorgeous even because of that art design, despite the fact that it's still running on hardware that was anemic 6 years ago and certainly is now. But because of the art design, first of all, the foundation or base, it is going to be cel-shaded graphics, same as Breath of the Wild. However, it seems like the developer really embraced color a lot more with the sequel, as there is a lot more bright, vibrant colors. It's not like you're watching Saturday morning cartoons or anything like that, but it is a much more vibrant, bright world. What really struck me though was some of the gorgeous vistas. When you're seeing a sunset or sunrise off of a mountain peak or maybe a desert plain, it just looks simply amazing. Because of the long draw distances, which I was actually impressed that the Switch was even able to pull off. And with your tablet, that's the equivalent of the Sheikah Slate from the first game, you can zoom in. Basically, you have a monocle, and zooming in across the map, you will see some objects in the environment, such as boulders and trees pop in. But that's what impressed me most with the graphics, is what Nintendo EPD was able to do with the draw distances, running some black magic trickery in the background, obviously. But all of the environments, the vistas, looked absolutely amazing and really does put you in the environment. Water also looked impressively good, considering I have played some very recently released Switch games, and water looked like we were back on the PS2 or the Wii, and this looked actually good, not only in handheld mode on my Switch OLED, but also docked on my TV. As for the audio design, I've been playing out of my surround sound speakers when docked, out of the internal speakers out of my Switch OLED, and then through some $7 wired earbuds. And I'd have to say what this game does in the audio department is going to be the ambiance of the environment, so you are indeed in the wild. You got nature and critters and wind and God forbid some natural disasters. There's a lot going on. Audio blend sounds phenomenal. Everything's buttery smooth in the ear canals. I thought the audio design was on point in Breath of the Wild, and a lot of the sound effects, crack of a sword on a goblin's noggin, it's all the same. Audio design, 10 out of 10. No issues here. The soundtrack is from Manaka Karioka. Sorry if I butchered that name. I think I nailed it. This isn't her first rodeo. She did the soundtrack for Animal Crossing as well as Breath of the Wild, so she returns for Tears of the Kingdom, and I'd have to say the music is pretty on point. A lot of times when you're exploring the environment, there is no background noise, so you can listen to the wind rustling through the trees and your horse neighing off in the distance. However, when the moment's just right, that soundtrack will fade in to boost the emotion of the moment. I like it. As for performance, I have been playing this game in handheld mode on my Switch OLED as well as docked. Generally, this game is at 30 frames per second, except for when it's not, which I'm not going to say is common, but it's not infrequent either. You will see some frame rate dips, especially when there's a ton of enemies on screen, or maybe there's a natural disaster going off where you got lightning over here, an explosion over there. We're talking about a Switch here. It's going to be chugging a bit. Now, there was only one occasion thus far in my playthrough where the frame rate chugged crazy bad, where it basically looked like the screen stopped moving for a second, like it was loading, and then bam, I was back in the action. It only lasted for a couple of seconds, but the frame rate was in the single digits for sure. Other than that, there are some pretty frequent dips into the what I would assume is 20s. It's not game breaking or anything. Actually, it's expected for such a large open world game. Definitely didn't hinder my experience of playing. It would be great if it wasn't there and it was a buttery smooth 60 or 30 frames per second. It's not the world we live in. It's not the console we're playing on. Performance was decent, actually good for the scope and scale of this game. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Repeat, an 8 out of 10. I think where this game really shines is in end game or replayability, because there is simply so much content here. If you're trying to get to 100% completion, you're looking at least 100 hours, and that's being very modest. You could spend hundreds of hours in this game because you technically have 3 maps to explore. We're talking about 168 miles long and 198 miles wide, and keep in mind there is an upside down style world, an alternate dimension that shares the same shrines. Their names are reversed, but if you find a shrine upstairs, down there in the depths of hell, there is another shrine that illuminates the underground world right below it. That map is also the size of Hyrule, underground. And then you have Sky Map, which doesn't have the same surface area as Hyrule or the underground cavernous area, because it's going to be floating pillars or islands that you can jump to. So if you play something like BioShock Infinite, it's the only game that comes to mind with a floating city. And it took me a couple of hours of gameplay to find out you can actually tab or scroll through these 3 different maps while you're in your menu. You have to press up and down on the D-pad and you'll scroll between the sky layer, the surface layer, and the underground layer, the depths. Now down the road, I'm going to be releasing a full comprehensive review once I get a little bit more stick time with Tears of the Kingdom, once I've been fully weepy and I've had a time to dry my eyes and then wet them again with Tears of the Kingdom, because it's simply that good thus far. But I did not want to wait to get my initial impressions review out, because I've gotten enough time behind the screen to tell you what the graphics look like and tell you, yup, there's a little bit of frame rate stutter, and tell you, yes, this feels just like Breath of the Wild, but turned up to a massive degree. And I really just didn't want to have a repeat of Hogwarts Legacy, a game that I beat, did a bunch of the side content, even started a second new game, got about a third of the way through my playthrough on that secondary character. Different house, of course, went from Ravenclaw to Hufflepuff. But that game's been out for a while. It's kind of cooled its heels. Nobody's really talking about it anymore. Yes, it has a little cult following, but it's kind of died off. And I still didn't get my goddamn review out. I even bought a couple of robes and a custom wand for the antics of that review. You know, I was going to be doing some crazy green screen skits and whatnot. But yeah, it never happened. And that's really unfortunate. I am still going to be reviewing Hogwarts Legacy because it is still a phenomenal title and is still in the running for Game of the Year. Although with Tears of the Kingdom here, I don't really see Legacy taking it, considering one of the reasons I haven't pumped out that review yet is I just kind of got less stimulated over time, because there really isn't that much in-game or replayability there. There's no online multiplayer. The developers have blatantly said that they're not going to be doing any DLC or expansion packs. They even cut features from the game like Quidditch, which is fucking crazy. You can see the Quidditch field out there, you just can't play on it. And while the game's a phenomenal RPG, even if you had never even heard of the Harry Potter series, you just want a good fantasy RPG to dick around with, other than some of the side quests being slightly different for some of the houses, there really isn't a whole lot of reasons to replay through the primary story, which is really sad because my initial playthrough was so good. I had such a great time playing through that game and then never got the review out, and that's not going to happen with Tears of the Kingdom. God damn it. Here's my initial review, and you're going to be getting a more meaty, brothy review after I've stirred the cauldron a little bit. That's a reference because I cook a lot in Tears of the Kingdom. Drop in the comments section below your opinion of Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, or any Zelda games. Let me know what your favorite Zelda title is, and I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at GamerHeaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the Stallions and Stallionettes of GamerHeaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting GamerHeaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.